So oftentimes you'll hear photographers talking about wraparound light, and you might be wondering, what exactly does that mean? Light isn't out here bending corners, it's not out here making left turns, so how exactly is light wrapping around your subject? What is wraparound light? So yes, light does indeed travel in straight lines. It's not out here wrapping around corners or objects, but light also bounces and reflects off of just about everything. Take, for example, the atmosphere. There's tons of particles in the air, and all of those particles are going to bounce and reflect that light in a bunch of different directions. The sun is a very defined light source, but the light that is reaching us here on Earth is certainly not a concentrated beam of light. It's lighting everything, even on a bright and sunny day. So as that light is traveling through the atmosphere, it's being bounced all around in just about every direction imaginable. So although that light is indeed traveling in a straight line, when you take light and you push it in all of these different directions, you get things to be lit that maybe aren't directly in the path of the light. So when we talk about wraparound light, it's not that the light is bending, it's that the light is being reflected in a bunch of different directions and therefore lighting different parts of your subject. So when it comes to wraparound light, it kind of is what it is. So you may be wondering, what's the point of the video? Why are you even talking about wraparound light? If it bounces off of what it bounces off of and it kind of does what it does, and it's not something that we as photographers necessarily have to specifically do something to have it do that, why are you making this video? I haven't been on a swing in a while. Well, it essentially boils down to modifier selection. Now, you might be wondering, what? Wraparound light, modifiers, how does that go together? Okay, so when it comes to picking your modifier, when you hear about getting soft light, you oftentimes, almost always hear the bigger the modifier, the better. That way you get the softest light. And that makes sense. And for the most part, yeah, you know, that pretty much holds true. But when you step back and think about exactly what type of light, the pattern of light, the drama, the mood, the shadows, when you start to think about those elements of what you're trying to get, your modifier choice with respect to wraparound light is going to be key. Now, I'm going to demonstrate in just a moment, but I want to get through and explain first, and then I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to show you. When it comes to wraparound light, essentially, if you want shadow, if you're getting a lot of wraparound light, that light is going to fill in your shadows. The bigger the modifier that you have, in theory, depending upon how you place the modifier, the more wraparound light you're going to have, which means the more those shadows are going to be filled in. So if you want to have soft light, but you also want to have shadows, going for a large modifier like a 36-inch, 48-inch, 60-inch modifier is going to have you working against what you're really trying to achieve. Now, it can still be done, and again, I'm going to demonstrate that, but you're going to be making it more difficult than it needs to be. So when it comes to wraparound light and essentially the shadows that you want, that's really what it comes down to. Because when we talk about wraparound light, it really is, it's lighting the shadow side of the face. It's filling in those shadows. So depending upon how much shadow you want and how deep or light you want those shadows to be, wraparound light is going to play a big factor. So if you want to have shadow, you want to have soft light, you know, shadows doesn't mean you can't have soft light. You definitely can have soft light with shadows. If you want the shadows, then it really is important to choose a modifier that's going to help achieve that. And so to do that, you really would use a smaller modifier. Now, even if you think about something like a 25-inch modifier, when you think about it, it's like, that seems really small. I'm not going to be able to get soft light. But remember that soft light is the size of the modifier, the size of the light source relative to your subject, right? So if I have a 25-inch modifier and I put it right here, now I got a big head, but it's not 25 inches, okay? So if I put that modifier right here, I'm still gonna get soft light because that modifier, that light source relative to my face is still large. So I'm going to still get soft light on the lit side of my face, but I'm not gonna get as much wraparound light because I have a smaller modifier. So there's not as much surface, not as much light that's being output that's gonna fill in the shadow side of the face. So I'm gonna go with a smaller modifier. So I get soft light on the lit part of the face, but I don't get as much wraparound light on the shadow side of the face, and I essentially achieve the goal. So now that I've explained that, let's go into demonstration mode so you can see exactly what it is I'm talking about. So I'm going to start in this position here because I want to illustrate essentially what wraparound light is, okay? So I'm going to put this in a split light position because that's really going to help you show, because you typically wouldn't light your subject in a split light unless you were going for something specific. So this will really show it, okay? So right now I have the edge of the modifier is basically lined up with Quinn's nose, essentially. And so you can see when I do that this side of the face is lit, this side of the face is in shadow. This is a little bit overexposed. I should probably change the camera settings, but we're gonna roll with it. So you can see we got that part lit, we got shadow over here. Now I'm gonna keep it in this split light position, but I'm just gonna bring the modifier forward. Now notice as I bring that modifier forward, so right now the back of the modifier is lined up with the back of her head right here. But now you can see as I do that, we start to get those shadows to open up. Now, of course, it's not gonna be as lit on this side of the face as it is on this side of the face, because obviously the light is here, it's a split light. But you can see that those shadows open up. So when I bring that modifier back, now you can see that those shadows are deep. And as I bring it forward, you start to see those shadows fill in. As I move it forward, we have the light coming out this way here, okay? So this is here, the light is coming out here in front of Quinn here, and that light is essentially being bounced in to fill in those shadows. So that is essentially what wraparound light is. It is basically light that is not directly hitting an area, but it's being bounced in to fill that area up, okay? So this is a 25-inch modifier. So when I was talking about earlier, if you wanted to have shadow on this side of the face, a smaller modifier would be the way to go. Now, as you can see, this is still soft light, because this, relative to the size of Quinn's head, this is still a relatively large light source. So the light on this side of the face is still soft light, but we have that shadow over there, okay? So if you're wanting to have that, where you have the light on one side that's soft, the shadow on the other side, a smaller modifier like this is gonna be the way to go. Now, let me switch to a larger modifier and show you that it can still be done, but it is more work. Now I have a ridiculously large 48-inch deep octave, okay? So if we do the same thing, you can essentially achieve the same thing. Now this is gonna be a little tough for me here, but if I do the same thing and I have the front of the modifier lined up with her nose, I'm gonna get the same thing. I'm still gonna get the split light and I get those shadows. And as I move this forward, you will have that wraparound light. Now the problem, however, is that if this is where your subject was, your subject is right here, I can reach back and touch, this would essentially be the backdrop. The problem is, to be able to have this big modifier, to have the front of the modifier lined up with Quinn's nose, there is a lot of modifier that's behind the subject. And what is that gonna do? It's gonna light your background. And you may not want that. So if you don't wanna light your background, but you wanna have the soft light with the shadows, you're making it really difficult using this big light source, okay? So if I bring this back in, of course, if we do this here, we've got that wraparound light. It is hard to maneuver with this. If I bring it back here, notice on the window, Notice the exposure on the window when I try to have it back here. And I'm hoping that it's in the right spot because I can't really see. So I think right there is good. Look at the exposure on the window. Okay, now I've got more light on the window. Whereas if I come up here, now I got more wraparound light, but I don't have that light on the window.